Well, I was really frustrated in traveling around the world and seeing things like global hunger and agricultural, disparities, and then coming home to our massive problem of obesity. The reason I was traveling so much is that I'd started a company and a nonprofit called Feed that was really focused on raising funds and awareness for international school feeding efforts, especially ones done by the UN World Food Program. And in seeing the problem of hunger up close, and then, like I said, coming home and seeing obesity in our own country, I started to realize that maybe it wasn't completely ironic that these problems of a billion people being hungry and a billion people being obese were happening simultaneously, and actually were also growing. And I started to notice a trend that most of those problems have actually grown dramatically in the last 30 years. And in studying the problems of hunger and obesity, I started to realize that actually, when you look at the root causes, they're actually quite similar. Both are issues where people have lack of access to nutritious foods. And so the 30 Project is really an effort to say, let's look at these two problems like they're actually one problem of global malnutrition, and let's think of long-term ways, as we've seen both of them develop in the last 30 years, let's look to the next 30 years and how we can actually solve and end both of them. A lot of the solutions to both of the problems are actually really short-term solutions. And what we need is a systemic solution that will address both hunger and obesity and create a healthier, better global food system. The reality is there are people that are hungry and really starving today in the world, and I don't think it's acceptable to say, well, let's just invest in agriculture that will feed them tomorrow. We really do need a short-term plan using food aid and using smart solutions like school feeding to feed people. But that said, sometimes when we really invest mostly in short-term plans, and especially in the emergencies that have been cropping up all over the world, we're not thinking through what are the long-term systemic and sustainable ways that we can feed people. And especially sometimes we've noticed that the solutions have actually become the problem in many ways. In America, we certainly don't have what people would call a very healthy food system. People are still hungry. 49 million Americans are still hungry, but we obviously have a rampant problem of obesity in our country, especially among children. So unless we're thinking really systemically about how to make sure we address the problem of hunger around the world, but not importing into especially third world countries in sub-Saharan Africa and Asia, our system of agriculture that has led to obesity, we have to have this dual approach that says, let's make sure people are not dying of starvation today, but let's also make sure that they're moving towards a healthy way to kind of feed themselves and their families in the long term. Starting Feed, I was really looking for, with my business partner, a way to get people to understand that global hunger was really a problem, and then offer people a very simple and tangible consumer-based solution to the problem. But what I started to realize is that over the long term, even 4 years in, which Feed is about 4.5 years old, I was personally becoming frustrated with the idea that over that 4.5 years, I didn't feel like I was getting to measurably ending hunger. I mean, I was moving towards a solution that would maybe be in another 10 years still something we needed to do. In other words, I was frustrated that 5 years down the road, I was still feeding children and the problem was actually growing. So the compliment is that we still need programs, especially like school feeding, that Feed supports today, because children are truly starving. And if we don't address malnutrition at the childhood stage, we're not going to help people become more productive, healthy citizens, and then eventually help promote healthy, productive economies later on. But at the same time, we have to think through how are we going to measurably end these problems and make sure that people don't join the ranks of the obese over time. Feed has been around for 4.5 years, and in my time there, and I know they're still continuing to do so, we've provided about 65 million school meals to children around the world. So the impact has been really amazing, and I'm so incredibly proud to have been a part of that. And the 30 Project actually is really kind of piggybacking off that and saying, okay, here's one of the next steps. And so far, we've had an incredible outreach and an outcry of support from people that are understanding these problems, obesity and hunger, as really being more tied than they are different. So we've had our first dinner in San Francisco. One of our key methods is to say that the activists that are fighting hunger and the activists that are fighting obesity often don't talk. And we're trying to bring them together at the city level to say, first of all, get to know each other and start working together. But second of all, and as importantly, let's think through what a better food system 30 years from now would look like. Because when you think about it, there's really no unified vision of what that long-term better global food system is. And we need to crowdsource that from the people that are really on the ground working on these issues and get an idea of what the goal is so that we can really start working towards it. Well, there's a ton of great food nonprofits and organizations and activists all around the world, doing the work in the trenches on a day-to-day basis. And I think what 30 Project and what I'm personally really invested in is how do we help augment their work by giving some structure and giving some long-term vision to what a better food system would look like. Because you have all these organizations that are doing incredible things on a day-to-day basis, sometimes not interacting in the way that could improve their mission and improve their work, but also not necessarily working towards a long-term, very specific goal. In America, we have a goal, especially championed by a great organization, Share Our Strength, to end child hunger by 2015. At the same time, we have the Millennium Development Goals that are attempting to have hunger by 2015. At the end of the day, that solution to address hunger, first of all, we're not necessarily going to meet those goals. And second of all, we're not then including the corollary problems of overweight and obesity and global malnutrition that are coming along at the same time. So my argument is we need a much longer term view and a much longer term vision that all of these organizations can hopefully get on board with and eventually work towards. I think the reality of social entrepreneurship is that there's this hybrid between what business can do to help address the world's problems and what nonprofits can do to help address the world's problems, and that we need both sides with people at the core that want their work to address the world's problems. So no matter if you're, running a company or you're an internal CSR agent at a big corporation, or you're a small nonprofit startup in your own community, both of those people actually are social entrepreneurs. And I think what's developed, especially in the last 5 years since I started Feed, is that there's a whole culture to people wanting their work to have deeper meaning. And so it's not very often that you meet entrepreneurs at all that don't now think, how can I be a social entrepreneur? How can I innovate that in a way that affects a problem that will make the world a better place? I think now that I look back on my kind of tenure as an entrepreneur, I realize that I never set out to be an entrepreneur. I actually just wanted to do what I wanted to do, and being an entrepreneur was the way to do it. And to be honest, I think that was a great way to be in startup mode, because I wasn't in startup mode in a formal way with a formal, operating plan or business plan or meetings with investors. I just, with Feed, the story really was that my business partner and I wanted to sell those bags and raise money for hungry kids, and starting a company and a nonprofit were the only way to do it. And again, with the 30 Project, I hit a point where I realized I want to take this to the next step, and the only way to do it was to start a new organization. So, I think I've been lucky that really passion has driven my work as an entrepreneur instead of sort of any kind of structural rules that might actually have helped in some ways, but it's definitely been really rewarding to say this is my passion, this is my goal, and whatever structure I need to create to get there is what I'll do. I think the number one thing I've found in terms of getting other people to care about food and food issues and global hunger and obesity the way I do is really my own passion and my own self-education. And something I think has been interesting as a young person and also maybe as a female is that, if there's ever a way that you're going to be less, taken less seriously, you can totally get above that by being the most well-read person in the room. And something that I've really been proud of throughout my career is that I've educated myself very deeply on all the issues that I care about. And that really helps to engage others, because when you can be not only a voice for change and passionate about what you want to do in the world, but also back it up with the data and back it up with the facts and back it up with your own personal experiences in the field, if you will. It's really, I think that's really the best way to get other people on board.